Hi everybody, I'm KHOU 11 meteorologist Pat Calvin coming to you from Houston, Texas with your tropical update for Saturday, August 26th, 2023. As of this afternoon, we now have a new tropical depression that we are keeping an eye on around the Yucatan Peninsula, and this is expected to move into the Gulf of Mexico as we get into the upcoming week. I just very quickly want to talk about what a tropical depression is. We were watching this earlier today and over the last few days as just a tropical wave, which meant that it was disorganized. That's the key designation between a tropical invest, which is what this was this morning, and a tropical depression is that element of organization. So now that we have an actual closed off center of circulation, it now goes from being a disorganized tropical wave to a tropical depression. The reason why it's not a tropical storm is because the winds are still under that threshold of 39 miles per hour. We do expect that to change though as we get into the next, I would say 24 to 36 hours. So there it is right now. I know it doesn't look very well organized, but we do have that center of circulation. You can actually kind of make out that little bit of spin there. Again, just off the Yucatan, we'd put the center of the low probably right about there. Winds again sustained at 30 miles per hour, so we're below that tropical storm threshold of 39 miles per hour. And this thing's not even moving right now, northwest at 1 mile per hour. So the thing is basically stationary, and that's how it's going to stay as we go through the next few days. As we kind of widen the shot, you can see it's a pretty lopsided system. Most of the storms here are on the east side of the storm, out towards the Yucatan, into the Yucatan Channel. Again, it's pretty thunderstorm free, so it's a lopsided system. It's not very well organized, but we do have that closed off center of circulation, which again gave us that designation of being a tropical depression. So let's talk about where it goes. It kind of meanders down in the Yucatan Channel for the next 24 to 36 hours, and then once it starts that jog to the north, not much stands in its way from strengthening. And the first official forecast from the National Hurricane Center has this system reaching hurricane status as early as Tuesday afternoon. And they go conservative typically in their first few forecasts. So right now they forecast it on just becoming a Category 1 hurricane, but things can change. And we're really going to get a better idea of what the future of this storm looks like tomorrow. And the reason for that is because the National Hurricane Center has the hurricane hunters flying into the storm. They're going to do several missions into the storm as we get into Sunday. And that data is going to be fed directly into our hurricane forecast models, which will give us a better idea of where the storm goes and how strong it can potentially get. So this is the first forecast right now. And I just want to talk about this because if you're watching from Florida, obviously this brings back memories of Ian from last year. It's a similar forecast cone. So let's just talk about what the forecast cone means. The forecast cone gives us the most probable path that the center of a storm will take. However, it is not flawless. The forecast cone shows us where the center of a storm will go only 60 to 70% of the time, which means that in a 5-day forecast, the center of that storm can either track off towards the west or can track off towards the east. So areas outside of this cone, from Alabama all the way down towards Fort Myers and Southwest Florida and even the Keys, but more so onto the mainland peninsula, really need to keep your guard up here until we get a better idea of where this storm is going. And that's probably going to come as we get into later tomorrow night and Monday morning. And then notice by overnight Monday into Tuesday, that's when the storm really starts to emerge here into the Gulf of Mexico. So it's a fairly small window of time because we do expect landfall sometime between Tuesday afternoon and Wednesday afternoon. So somewhere in that window, we're expecting landfall. And that's going to be anywhere from the Big Bend coast of Florida down to Tampa Bay or back into the Panhandle. So still a pretty wide-ranging envelope of possibilities that we could see here with this system. So again, just keep this in your mind if you're watching from Florida, that now is the time to start getting prepared, even if you live outside of the cone. So again, out towards Panama City Beach as you get into Mobile, Alabama, and then also down into Southwest Florida. as well. Okay, so let's talk impacts. Rainfall is going to be a really wide-reaching impact from the storm. Even areas that aren't in the forecast cone down towards the southern half of Florida, from Fort Myers into Miami, you could see upwards of 1 to 3 inches of rainfall. And that's much needed rain, by the way, in Southwest Florida, because they are running a pretty big deficit and a drought. The core of the rain, though, is going to likely be towards the core of the storm. And this one computer simulation brings that into the Big Bend coast and eventually up into East Georgia and eventually into the Carolinas. But immediate impacts, again, for rainfall are pretty much going to be from the Big Bend of Florida as you get all the way down the Florida west coast. Even if you don't see a landfall, we're talking about tons of rain here through the Tampa Bay area, into Sarasota, Bradenton, and again, eventually into Southwest Florida. Let's talk about the ingredients that go into this storm. We talk about it all the time, water temperatures. The water's cooking in the Gulf. We've got water temperatures on average around 90 degrees, but that's not the only ingredient you need. We also have to look at atmospheric conditions, and a big one for us is wind shear. So on the map, we've got plotted mid to upper level wind shear. And basically where you see the colors going from green to blue, that indicates areas of stronger wind shear. And we don't have a lot of that here in the Gulf of Mexico. It's a lot of that green coloring, if anything at all. So in terms of wind shear, there might be a little bit that it deals with as it starts to enter the Gulf, but once this thing gets going off the west coast of Florida, there's really not going to be a ton of wind shear that it has to deal with. So I do think hurricane strength is looking likely, and that's why the Hurricane Center went with that forecast. And then watch what happens as it moves over land. It starts to interact with the jet stream. That's what all the dark blue coloring is in this part of the map here, is the jet stream is actually going to be diving pretty far south as we get into the middle of the week. And that's going to help to carry this system away from the southeast, eventually back into the open Atlantic. It's going to kind of tear it apart, so it is going to weaken quite a bit once it gets over land. But until that happens, this thing has plenty of real estate to strengthen and develop into an organized and healthy storm while it's over the Gulf of Mexico. All right, so let's take a look at one of our future track models. This is a high resolution snapshot of what this thing could look like Sunday night into Monday morning. And notice, we are still seeing the center of circulation there in the Yucatan Channel. So again, over the next 24 to 36 hours, this thing doesn't really move that much. But watch what happens as we continue to play the clock forward from Monday morning into Monday night and Tuesday morning. Not only does this thing cover a ton of ground, but look at how much better organized it becomes here. And this is just one model simulation. Again, we really don't have a great idea of where this storm is going or how strong it's going to be yet. We'll have a better idea of that, though, once the hurricane hunters go into this thing tomorrow. But this simulation has a symmetrical looking storm. So it's healthy, it's compact. We don't see any impacts of wind shear, which is what we just showed you. Again, not a lot of wind shear to deal with in this part of the Gulf. And then the big question is, does it trend north? Does it trend more towards the north and east? Does it go more north and west? I mean, these are still a lot of questions that have to be answered, which is why if you live anywhere from the Panhandle into Southwest Florida, you got to be keeping a very close eye on this storm. And really, you need to make sure that you're prepared if this storm were to make a jog in your direction. So again, that snapshot there is early Tuesday morning. So Tuesday at about 8 to 9 a.m., this thing is going to be pretty well organized and probably just passing off to the west of the lower Keys. Okay, so that's one model simulation. This is a high resolution model. High resolution models are a little more prone to big wobbles and big changes. So let's go back to our more trusted models, the global models. So first we're going to start with the European. We're going to start with the European first because the European model in this case picked up on this storm before any other computer models did. So the European has been very consistent with this storm. And when it comes to forecasting tropical systems, we look for consistency. When you've got consistency, that helps forecasting confidence. Now, the reason why there's not a lot of confidence in this forecast is because it's really only just been the European model giving us the same solutions over and over again. We really want to see what other computer models say, and we want to see what the European model says after we input that data from the hurricane hunters tomorrow. But this is what it shows. In line with that high resolution model that I just showed you, Monday afternoon, this thing is still in the Yucatan Channel. So there's really good agreement that the storm doesn't move much in the next 24 to 48 hours. So we know that for sure. From there, watch what the European model does. It starts to organize the storm. The more of these black lines you see, these are called isobars. They indicate areas of pressure. So the more lines you have and the closer they are together, the stronger the storm. That's why I have them plotted there. And then the green, the orange, the red, that indicates rainfall rates, so precipitation around the center of that storm. So by Tuesday night and Wednesday morning, so this is pre-dawn Wednesday, the center of the storm on the European model is just off, probably about 200, 250 miles off of Tampa Bay. So again, we're not expecting with this solution a landfall on the west coast of Florida, but that can change. And look at how close it is, a little close for comfort. So we got to keep that in mind. From there, we potentially see a landfall somewhere in the Big Bend coast. So that's the European computer model. The American computer model showing a very similar solution in terms of placement here. So that's good. We're seeing some agreement there with the global models, probably about 200 to 300 miles to the west of Tampa, but a deeper system. Notice how many more black lines there are and how much closer they are together. So this indicates the potential for a stronger storm system. So this is why we have to really keep our guard up, because this thing could intensify fast once it gets into the open waters of the Gulf, which are about 90 degrees. And again, not a lot of wind shear, no dry air, so not much standing in its way from reaching that big intensity. So here's the big takeaway. If you live anywhere from Naples, Florida, up towards Pensacola, I know that's a huge range, but these are the spots that really need to monitor the forecast as we go through the next few days. By tomorrow, we're going to be able to trim this down a bit, I think, because by that point, we're going to have, again, newer model data, new information from the hurricane hunters. The storm will probably be a little better organized. In fact, I think we'll probably have a tropical storm by this time tomorrow. And so we're just going to have a clearer picture as to what this thing is doing. But for now, if you live anywhere in Florida, you got to keep a very close eye on this system. And that it does extend all the way up into Georgia and the Carolinas for the flooding potential, not because we're expecting a hurricane, but because we could see quite a bit of rainfall in that area. That's not the only system we're watching. I want to quickly touch on Hurricane Franklin. This is going to stay out to sea, but as of the evening advisory here, winds were sustained at 85 miles per hour, and it was moving to the north-northwest at about 10 miles per hour. So it's a Cat 1 hurricane. Watch this, though. By Sunday night and Monday morning, this thing turns into a major Category 3 hurricane. The good news, though, it threads the needle between Bermuda and the East Coast. So this is going to be an issue for shipping lanes. This is not going to be an issue, though, at least as it looks right now, for any landmass. Bermuda will have to keep a close eye on this, but I do think it stays in between Bermuda and the East Coast of the United States. So that's the latest that we've got for you on Tropical Depression 10 and on Hurricane Franklin. Again, more information is going to be coming out over the next few days on Tropical Depression 10 as it develops and moves into the Gulf of Mexico. So stay with us for the latest on that as we get into the upcoming week.